Today's case took place in Nanjing, Jiangsu Province, China. On the afternoon of February 28, 2011, two college students were hiking on Mount Jiangjun. They were familiar with the small trails on this mountain. That day, they chose a narrow path to climb to the summit. As they reached the middle of the mountain, they suddenly smelled a strong, foul odor. Ahead, in the bushes, they vaguely saw several bags. Both felt very frustrated, wondering who could be so inconsiderate as to litter and even go through the trouble of carrying trash halfway up the mountain to dump it. They wondered if this litter bug had too much free time on their hands. Out of curiosity, the two approached to take a closer look. When they opened the bags, they were met with a horrifying sight. Instead of trash, they found decomposing body parts. Trembling with fear, they immediately called the police. Upon receiving the report, the police quickly arrived and immediately cordoned off the scene. After careful inspection and counting, they discovered a total of 11 bags containing body parts nearby. After thorough examination, the forensic team was able to reassemble a complete male body. The victim was estimated to be between 40 and 50 years old, slightly overweight and quite muscular. The skull was fractured, clearly indicating death by blunt force trauma. The face was severely damaged. The time of death was estimated to be about 2 to 3 days prior. The forensic experts also discovered that the perpetrator had a skilled technique, with some knowledge of human anatomy. The cuts were all made at weak points. Therefore, they speculated that the killer was likely to be a doctor, butcher, or police officer. No murder weapon or bloodstains were found at the scene, and there were no signs of struggle in the surrounding area. Thus, this was certainly not the primary crime scene, but merely a dump site. The victim's body parts were placed in black garbage bags tied with plastic cords. Due to rain 2 days earlier, footprints and fingerprints at the scene were no longer identifiable. So who was the victim? The police quickly reviewed missing person reports, hoping to find clues about the victim's identity. However, all efforts were in vain. They only received one report of a missing child, who was found a few hours later. In the following week, there were reports of missing elderly women, but most had either gotten lost or run away from home. There were no missing middle-aged men. Could it be that someone from another region came to Nanjing to dispose of a body after committing murder? The veteran police officers in Nanjing believed this was impossible. Mount Jiangjun is not a famous landmark, but a small mountain covering an area of about 1.35 square miles. Even many local Nanjing residents couldn't locate Mount Jiangjun. Moreover, the path where the perpetrator dumped the body was quite remote. If someone hadn't been there before, it would be difficult to find the way, let alone dump a body. Furthermore, if an outsider came to Nanjing to dispose of a body, why not dump it in more remote rural areas or on barren hills near the urban-rural fringe rather than on Mount Jiangjun, which is close to universities and residential areas? This would be extremely easy to discover. Most police officers believed that the killer was a local Nanjing resident. However, it was difficult to determine whether the deceased was also a local. The top priority was to identify the victim as soon as possible. However, the victim's face was also severely damaged, making identification impossible. The Nanjing police invited experts from the Jiangsu Provincial Public Security Bureau to reconstruct the skull in an attempt to restore the deceased's appearance. But even though the experts tried to reconstruct the face from the skull, many important details were still missing. The investigation seemed to have hit a dead end, giving the investigators a headache. At this moment, an unexpected discovery opened up a new direction. During a meticulous examination, the forensic team discovered a small but extremely important detail on the victim's body that had been previously overlooked. On the victim's underwear, there was a sophisticated secret pocket, cleverly disguised as a label. This pocket was so intricate that even the naked eye could hardly detect it. Inside the secret pocket, experts found a small, crumpled piece of paper soaked in blood. At first glance, this piece of paper seemed unremarkable. However, it became the key that opened a breakthrough in the investigation. The police quickly used modern technology to restore this small piece of paper. They were delighted to discover it was a train ticket fragment. It showed a journey from Lanzhou to Nanjing on February 25, 2011, with the seat number clearly visible. Since train tickets had started implementing a real name registration system, the police quickly traced the name of the ticket buyer. Through a household registration investigation, this person was identified as Tian Mingcheng, approximately 40 years old, from Lanzhou. When compared with the photo reconstructed from the skull earlier, the police found that he closely resembled the victim. It seemed that the identity issue had been resolved. After that, the police immediately formed a special task force to go to Lanzhou, directly to Mingcheng's home. However, Mingcheng's wife seemed very surprised by the police's questions. She said her husband was at work. How could he be missing? The police hurriedly went to Tian Mingcheng's company to confirm, only to find him alive and working normally. So why did his train ticket appear on the victim's body? Faced with the police's questions, Mingcheng appeared very shocked. He explained that he had indeed bought a train ticket to Nanjing. At that time, he was visiting his second sister-in-law, Xue Liping, and his niece. His second older brother had died in a car accident 5 years ago, and his sister-in-law was raising their child alone in Nanjing. He had a good relationship with his sister-in-law and loved his niece very much, so he often visited them. As for the train ticket, he had either thrown it away, or it might have been picked up by someone else. The task force immediately investigated Mingcheng's statement. According to the forensic examination, the victim's time of death was late on the night of the 25th. The police checked the surveillance cameras of the hotel where Tian Mingcheng stayed and found that he had returned to his room on the afternoon of the 25th, then went for a bath and massage at the hotel, and then to a bar to watch soccer until 2 a.m. before returning to his room to rest. Early the next morning, he left the hotel, took a bus to the airport, and flew back to Lanzhou. It seemed that Mingcheng was indeed not the killer, but it was very strange why the victim would pick up this train ticket and put it in a secret pocket. Logically, keeping a train ticket in such a discreet place suggests it was something very important. Or was it not the victim who put it there, but the killer deliberately doing so to mislead the police? Once again, the case reached a dead end. Fortunately, the police officer in charge of tracing evidence quickly found a new lead. Previously, according to the forensic examination, the murder weapons could have been an axe and a cleaver. These two items were very common and difficult to trace. But the plastic bags containing the body provided a good clue. Through analysis, these plastic bags came from the Metro supermarket in Jiangning District, Nanjing. Subsequently, the task force reviewed the supermarket's surveillance footage for the 15 days before the crime, filtering out those who bought axes, cleavers, and garbage bags. However, the number of such people was very high, making it difficult to identify the killer from this information. At this point, Mingcheng had become uncooperative, making excuses that he and the victim had no relationship. However, the criminal investigators noticed that he seemed very anxious, constantly making phone calls and saying something excitedly. Based on their professional instincts, the police believed that the case must be related to the Tian family. Therefore, they approached an acquaintance of the Tian family, asking him to help review the surveillance footage to see if any of the suspects were related to Mingcheng. Unexpectedly, after watching for less than 15 minutes, there was a major discovery. This acquaintance immediately recognized that one of the suspicious buyers on February 24th was Mr. Xue Jinggong, the father-in-law of Mingcheng's deceased second older brother. This man was over 70 years old and a well-known businessman in Nanjing. On that day, he had bought an axe, a cleaver, and many garbage bags at the supermarket. It seemed that Mr. Xue and Mingcheng must be involved in this case. However, based solely on this surveillance video, nothing could be concluded. It wasn't even enough to summon Mr. Xue for questioning. At this point, the forensic experts had reconstructed the victim's face multiple times, and the more they looked, the more it resembled Mingcheng. Could it be that he and Mr. Xue had together killed a relative of the Tian family? From this breakthrough, the police quickly conducted a thorough investigation into the Tian family members. The family had 2 sisters and 3 brothers in total. The eldest brother was Tian Mingcheng, the second brother was Tian Mingguang, and the youngest was Tian Mingcheng. These 3 brothers looked very similar, while other relatives didn't resemble them much. Currently, besides Mingyang living in Lanzhou, the eldest brother Mingcheng had died in a car accident 5 years ago, and the second brother had mysteriously disappeared after that accident. The family had explained that Mingguang, overwhelmed with grief over his brother's death, had gone to Shenzhen alone to start a business. He hadn't returned home in all these years. Could the victim be Tian Mingcheng? The police simultaneously extracted surveillance footage from the train station and the apartment complex of Mingyang's sister-in-law, Xue Liping. They discovered that on that day, besides Mingyang, there was always a rather chubby man accompanying him. The two entered Liping's home together, but afterwards, only Mingyang came out alone. A few hours later, suddenly 4 men burst into Liping's home, then carried out a large sack, threw it into an Audi parked outside, and quickly drove away. Although the man accompanying Mingyang had deliberately avoided cameras throughout the process, he still left some angles captured. Compared with the reconstructed face of the victim, the police believed this man was Tian Mingcheng. The person later stuffed into the sack was probably him too. At this point, the police speculated that perhaps Mingyang had killed his brother Mingguang together with his sister-in-law, and her father, Mr. Xue, was responsible for buying the murder weapons for them. The motive for the crime still needed further investigation. Therefore, the police quickly took DNA samples from Mingguang's son for comparison. However, the results surprised everyone. The victim was not Mingguang. But the victim's DNA had a very high similarity with Mingguang's son's DNA. This truly puzzled everyone. The victim wasn't Mingguang, but he was certainly a relative of his. Therefore, the police took DNA samples from all members of the Tian family to compare with the victim. This time, they finally discovered the true identity of the victim, but the result shocked everyone to their core. No one expected that the victim would turn out to be the eldest brother Tian Mingcheng, who had supposedly died in a car accident 5 years ago. What was going on here? Could the dead come back to life? Tian Mingcheng's car accident 5 years ago still had complete documentation, and even a Japanese insurance company had paid out compensation. So how could a person die twice? Just as everyone was confused about what to do, Mingyang suddenly confessed the truth to the police. He said that the victim was indeed the eldest brother Mingcheng, while the person who died in the car accident 5 years ago was actually the second brother Mingguang. What was the story behind this seemingly unbelievable tale? Tian Mingcheng was born in 1962 into a large family in a poor rural area of Lanzhou. Despite the family's difficult circumstances, he showed exceptional intelligence early on, determined to find opportunities to change his fate. After abandoning farming, he boldly ventured into business, gradually improving his life significantly. In the early 1980s, riding the wave of overseas migration, Mingcheng set foot in Japan with dreams of a better life. After a decade of relentless struggle, he not only established himself in a foreign land but also built a career, becoming a small business owner. During this time, Mingcheng married a Japanese woman of Chinese descent and had 2 children with her. To facilitate his life and career, he decided to naturalize as a Japanese citizen, changing his name to Tanaka Mingcheng. However, this marriage didn't last long. After the divorce, custody of the 2 children was given to his ex-wife. After naturalization, Mingcheng's career became even more successful. He quickly opened his own health food company. In April 1999, while touring Mount Fuji, Mingcheng met Xue Liping, a female international student. She was 8 years younger than him, from Nanjing, and born into a family of high-ranking officials. Her father was a hospital official, and her mother was a chief physician. Liping, heartbroken from a failed relationship, had decided to go to Japan to study beauty therapy, hoping to heal her emotional wounds. Fate brought her to meet Tian Mingcheng during a tour. Their conversation was incredibly harmonious, leaving a deep impression on both of them. Coincidentally, a few months later, they met again at a health food fair. Attracted by Liping's beauty and grace, Mingcheng began to pursue her. Love quickly blossomed between them. By January 2001, they had officially married. After marriage, Liping also naturalized as a Japanese citizen and changed her name to Tanaka Liping, marking a new beginning in her life. Their happiness was made complete when a year later, they welcomed the birth of their little daughter. However, life isn't always smooth sailing. At this time, Mingcheng's business began to face difficulties. The Japanese economy was in recession, coupled with fierce competition from rivals, causing his company to struggle increasingly. Financial pressure weighed heavily on the young couple, leading to frequent arguments. Subsequently, Liping returned to China with their daughter and started her own business, opening a beauty salon in Nanjing. During this time, she reunited with her ex-boyfriend Tang Kai. Tang Kai was also in the beauty industry and was very helpful in assisting Liping with her startup. Gradually, their old feelings reignited. But having a family, Liping had to maintain an appropriate distance from Tang Kai. Meanwhile, Mingcheng remained alone in Japan, trying to keep his business afloat. By 2006, his company was drowning in debt, on the brink of bankruptcy. Unable to hold on any longer, he decided to return to China to raise capital. Previously, while still in Japan, Mingcheng had purchased an accident insurance policy worth 200 million yen, approximately $1.8 million. Shortly after his return to China, in August 2006, he died in a car accident. Regarding this mysterious car accident, Liping recounted, "After returning to China, Mingcheng went to his hometown in Lanzhou to borrow money. He had arranged to meet his brother Mingguang. After greeting each other, he explained his purpose of borrowing money. Mingguang agreed immediately. At this time, Liping discovered their daughter had diarrhea, so she called Mingcheng. Upon hearing this, Mingcheng was very worried about his daughter, so his brother told him to go to Nanjing first, and he would send the money later when he had gathered enough. Mingcheng hurried to the airport, leaving his brother to drive his car back for him. In his haste, he left his phone, wallet, and personal belongings in the car. Half an hour later, as Mingguang was driving his brother's car on the highway, the car suddenly burst into intense flames, quickly burning the person inside to charcoal. The traffic police, based on the phone, driver's license, and other items found at the scene matching the car owner's information, concluded that the person burned to death was Mingcheng. They quickly notified Liping of the sad news and issued an accident certificate. Upon receiving the tragic news, Liping cried uncontrollably. But unexpectedly, a few hours later, Tian Mingcheng opened the door and walked into the house. Liping, panicked, asked, "Aren't you dead?" Mingcheng, bewildered, replied, "What are you talking about?" Only then did Liping recount the events to her husband. Upon hearing this, Mingcheng realized that his brother Mingguang had died in the car accident, and he was overwhelmed with grief. At this point, the couple intended to tell the family the truth, but they suddenly remembered the large insurance policy they had purchased in Japan. If they let the misidentification stand and claimed the insurance money, they could overcome their current financial difficulties. Mingcheng would only need to hide for a few years, then use fake documents, and the family of 3 could live happily together again. So the couple decided to take the risk. Afterwards, Liping arranged for Mingcheng to temporarily stay at a hotel outside using his own documents. A few days later, he secretly went to Baoji City to hide under a false name. Out of fear, when identifying the body, he refused DNA testing, so the compensation documents were incomplete, and thus he didn't receive full compensation. In the following 6 months, he received over 5 million yuan, approximately $770,000, in compensation from the Japanese insurance company in 3 installments. However, the Nanjing police had some doubts about Liping's statement. Mingcheng had an accident shortly after returning to the country. Coincidentally, he had also purchased a large insurance policy in Japan, and the car suddenly caught fire strangely, with such large flames that the person inside had no chance to escape. Finally, it led to being burned alive. The strange thing was, no matter how rushed Mingcheng was, how could he leave all his personal belongings in the car? Normally, people would at least carry their phone, right? And the story about their daughter having diarrhea, it wasn't a serious illness. Why the need to rush so much? The police speculated that it's very likely that he deliberately left these items behind to create a fake scene of his accident. This could very well be a carefully planned murder for insurance fraud by the couple, Mingcheng and Liping. not hesitating to sacrifice the life of his own brother. But due to the carelessness of the examiner, once the body was cremated, all evidence was gone, and this case could no longer be investigated. After Mingcheng's death, Liping naturally sold her husband's company in Japan and gave 2 million yuan, about $308,000, of the proceeds to her in-laws. She kept the 5 million yuan, about $770,000, insurance money for her own business. So Mingcheng lived a life of hiding in Shaanxi and Henan provinces. Meanwhile, Liping in Nanjing ran her beauty salon very successfully. With additional capital and the help of her lover, Liping's beauty salon business thrived, opening many branches. Making money, she also invested in her father's company, causing her father's business to develop rapidly as well. Not only was her work going well, but Liping's love life was also smooth sailing. Tang Kai, unaware of the truth, thought Liping's husband had died in an accident and began openly pursuing her. He was also very good to her daughter, taking care of her attentively, which moved Liping deeply. During the 3 years of Mingcheng's absence, friends who didn't know the situation enthusiastically urged Liping to start a new romantic life. Reluctantly, she had to make her relationship with boyfriend Tang Kai public. So what about Mingcheng? How had he been living? This dead man had no legal identity in society, had to hide every day, didn't dare to stay in large hotels, could only live in shabby inns and illegal rental rooms. Those places were also gathering spots for all sorts of people. Therefore, he made a secret pocket in his underwear, where he could hide money in case of emergencies. Every day he didn't dare to go out much, getting anxious whenever he saw police. Most of the time he just lay on the bed watching TV in the rental room. His meals were mainly instant noodles. On the first anniversary of Mingguang's death, Mingcheng went to Famen Temple in Baoji to light incense. Unexpectedly, he met an old classmate there. The friend, not knowing he was supposed to be dead, greeted him. At this moment, Mingcheng pretended not to know him and hurriedly ran away. Afterwards, he packed his belongings and moved to a different place. Mingcheng had lived anonymously like a sewer rat for 3 years, not daring to contact his wife proactively, mostly letting her contact him. During these years, knowing that his wife's business was growing, he was also very happy, hoping to end this kind of life soon so his wife could open a health food company for him. However, as time went on, he found his wife becoming increasingly cold, seemingly intentionally distancing herself from him. By Chinese New Year 2009, having not received a call from his wife for a long time, he couldn't resist calling her from a public phone. Unexpectedly, Liping made an excuse of being busy and hung up. This made Mingcheng very angry. After careful consideration, he decided to end his life in hiding and return home to reunite with his wife and child. Until June 2009, just as Liping and her daughter arrived home and were about to open the door, Mingcheng suddenly appeared from the hallway. Seeing her supposedly dead father appear, the daughter cried out in fear. Liping was also startled to see her husband in shabby clothes. Although the couple had initially conspired together to defraud the insurance, Liping now had a new love and was even planning to marry. Fortunately, Tang Kai was away on a business trip recently. She had to think of a way to get rid of Mingcheng. When Mingcheng saw the luxurious apartment and his lovely wife and daughter, he couldn't help but exclaim, "It's so good to be home." That night, he tried to embrace his wife intimately, but Liping refused, using the excuse of not wanting to wake their daughter. At this point, Mingcheng thought, perhaps because they had been apart for too long, his wife wasn't used to it yet, so he didn't force her and had to sleep in the living room. A few days later, Liping took their daughter to her parents' home. The innocent child blurted out that her father had returned. This greatly surprised Mr. Xue. After questioning, she had to tell her father the whole story. Upon learning the truth, Mr. Xue scolded his daughter for being reckless, saying she shouldn't have been involved in such illegal activities. But at this point, saying those things was no longer helpful. Mingcheng was rejected by his wife every night with various excuses. One night, Liping deliberately stayed out until midnight, only to find her husband still waiting for her. He ignored her protests and forced himself on her. At this point, Liping had feelings for someone else, so she felt extremely distressed. With no other choice, she had to ask her father for help. By then, Mr. Xue had assets worth tens of millions of yuan, millions of dollars, and he thought only money could drive him away. So the next day, Liping gave her husband a bank card with 3 million yuan, about $462,000, saying this was the insurance compensation, the part he deserved. She told him to take this money and start a new life, and that she would take good care of their daughter. Faced with this action from his wife, Mingcheng slapped her, questioning if she had another man. Liping could only cry and beg for her husband's forgiveness. At this moment, Mingcheng understood that he had become redundant and could no longer live in this family. Reluctantly, he took the money and left, his heart full of resentment. But the matter didn't end there. The more Mingcheng thought about it, the angrier he became. He thought, I risked so much, lived in hiding for years just so the whole family could have a good life. Now my wife and child are indeed living well, but I've fallen into this situation. Now they give me 3 million to drive me away. It's really unfair. Feeling betrayed and hurt, Mingcheng decided to live recklessly, indulging in a life of debauchery. In just 2 short years, he had spent all 3 million yuan. When his pockets were empty, instead of coming to his senses, he turned to blackmailing Liping. In trying to meet her ex-husband's unreasonable demands, Liping gradually fell into difficult circumstances. Her beauty salon faced severe cash flow shortages, on the verge of bankruptcy. Even her father's company was affected, falling into a precarious financial situation. But Mingcheng was like a bottomless pit. No matter how hard Liping tried, she couldn't satisfy his unreasonable demands. In desperation, Liping had to arrange to meet him, begging him to stop. However, Tian Mingcheng's answer made her even more desperate. He declared that he didn't need money anymore, but in exchange, he would return to reunite with the family. Not only that, Mingcheng followed Liping home and discovered Tang Kai picking up his daughter from school. He took this opportunity to tell Tang Kai everything, wanting him to stay away from Liping. But unexpectedly, after hearing Liping and her father's explanation, Tang Kai not only forgave their deception, but also said he wouldn't leave Liping. Unable to achieve his wishes, Mingcheng thought about seeking help. He returned to his hometown and told the whole story to his family. When they saw their eldest brother, who they thought had been long dead, the whole family was overjoyed. Seeing that his brother wanted to reconcile with his family, the youngest brother Mingyang said he would go with him to meet their second sister-in-law to mediate. He remembered that his sister-in-law used to be very fond of him. He even called Liping, saying that he would come with his eldest brother on the 25th so everyone could talk. But when Liping received the call, she was completely distraught. She begged them not to disturb her life anymore. Mingcheng, who was beside her, overheard this and grabbed the phone, saying that he must return to this family, or else he would reveal the insurance fraud. With no other choice, Liping had to tell her father and boyfriend about the phone call. At this point, there was no turning back. Seeing his daughter being bullied like this, Mr. Xue decided to help her get rid of Mingcheng. In his eyes, Mingcheng had been dead for a long time. As long as the body couldn't be identified, no one would know it was him. And he himself was over 70 years old. Risking his life for his daughter was worth it. But thinking about his advanced age, he asked Tang Kai to find some thugs to kidnap Mingcheng, saying he wanted to teach him a lesson. Then Mr. Xue went to the supermarket to buy an axe, a cleaver, and garbage bags, hiding them in the villa to wait for Mingcheng's arrival. On that day, as agreed, the two brothers Mingcheng and Mingyang came to Liping's house to negotiate. They argued until evening without reaching a conclusion. Mingyang, feeling that this was a marital issue and he shouldn't interfere anymore, returned to his hotel first. Not long after he left, Tang Kai brought people to tie up Mingcheng and take him to Mr. Xue's villa. After Tang Kai and his people left, Mr. Xue told his daughter to go home, saying he would handle the rest. At this point, Mingcheng also sensed the old man's intention to kill him. He begged, but to no avail. So, he made an excuse to go to the bathroom, then tucked the train ticket of his brother into the secret pocket in his underwear, hoping that the police could use this ticket to identify him later. At around 8 p.m., Mr. Xue killed Mingcheng with an axe, then used his medical knowledge to dismember the body. Initially, he planned to dispose of the body parts in a more distant location, but by the time he finished, it was already 2 a.m. He had to dispose of the body before daybreak, so he had to dump the bags containing the body parts on Mount Jiangjun, just a few hundred meters away from the villa. Afterwards, to prevent Mingyang from becoming suspicious, he impersonated Mingcheng and sent a text message to Mingyang, saying he had gone to Henan and there was no need to look for him anymore. Therefore, when the police initially investigated, Mingyang didn't tell the truth, mainly because he was afraid his eldest brother would be arrested and sent to prison. After hearing that the victim was actually his eldest brother, he realized something was wrong and hurriedly confessed everything. The police later found a lot of Mingcheng's blood in Mr. Xue's villa and car. He also confessed to killing his son-in-law. Subsequently, the police also arrested Liping as she was preparing to flee to Japan. Tang Kai also turned himself in to the police, admitting to the kidnapping but not participating in the murder. In 2013, the court sentenced Mr. Xue for intentional homicide, giving him a death sentence with a 2-year reprieve and life deprivation of political rights. Xue Liping was convicted of being an accomplice to murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, later reduced to 15 years in prison. Tang Kai and several other involved individuals were convicted of kidnapping with various sentences. With this, the bizarre and complex case was finally solved. As this case closed, we can't help but be shocked by the unexpected turns of life. From a simple fraud plan, the situation escalated into a bloody tragedy. This case serves as a mirror reflecting the dark sides of greed, selfishness, and how people can lose their humanity when pushed into a corner. But at the same time, it's also a warning about the power of justice and truth. No matter how long they are buried, the truth will eventually be revealed, and justice will be served. And that's the story for today. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.